I want to talk to you today a little bit about vision and what I believe to be God's vision, and therefore what I would say would be my vision for our church. You might say, well, that's a little strange because we so often focus on vision and talk about church's vision at the beginning of the year. It's something we do early in the year. And we think that as if God only speaks to pastors and churches and church leadership and individuals late in the year, or maybe early, maybe January. We think God only speaks to the church in November and December and January, and as if God doesn't speak the rest of the year. He doesn't speak necessarily in February or March or April or May. I mean, it's kind of like this thought that vision always has to be kind of tucked away to that time when we talk so much about vision early as we break into a new season and begin to look at what God is going to speak for that particular given time. However, if we're keen to listening, God is always speaking. If we have a heart toward listening, God is always speaking, and His plan for us is always unfolding, and He's not limited to the short seasons that we may give Him as we seek Him concerning what He has in store for us. God's voice is always communicating to us that which He desires. God's plan is not to reduce and package into a once-a-year communication with His people. In fact, what we find out is that the Christian life is a living experience. It's a life that is ongoing. I was thinking about this morning, and I got to thinking about that, which I might illustrate it with, and I thought, it's kind of like these plants around here, around the platform today. They're beautiful plants. They add a nice atmosphere to our sanctuary. But the truth is, these plants don't change from week to week. You notice that? You never have to, ladies, this next week when you clean, you'll never have to pick a dead leaf off one of these plants, because these things are just silk plants. They are dead. And yet the body of Christ is to be a living body. If these plants were alive, we'd have to make sure they got sufficient sunlight. We'd have to make sure they got sufficient water and sufficient fertilizer and all the things that are necessary to make plants look nice and stay green. And I'm really not an authority in that in any way, shape, or form. So believe me, I'm talking way over my head. But, we'd have to take care of those things. And yet there are many times when we come to church and we are much like these plants in the sense that we have all the signs about us that look like we're perfect in every way. We're serving God in every way, and yet we are not really alive. We're not those kind of plants that are living plants. And I'm not going to say you're dead. I'm just going to let you kind of think that, if that comes to your mind, then that's fine. But we're just not alive and doing the things that God has called us to do. And yet the Scriptures clearly tell us that the Christian life is a living experience. In fact, it's marked with life. And Jesus said that it's not only marked with life, but it's marked with abundant life. The kind of exciting life, the kind of thing that there is no lack of. Can't be one of those situations where we step back and say, my Christian life is just one of those things. But it's it's really kind of boring. It doesn't lack lacks luster. It doesn't seem to have anything exciting going on. If that is the case, then guess who is the problem? Are you with me today? Okay. We have to understand that God wants to give us life and in abundance. And, God would just as soon speak something into your life today as He would any other time of the year. And the neat thing about that is, as we see here this morning, God can begin to speak something into our spirit. We don't have to wait till January. We don't have to wait till the beginning of the year. God wants to speak something into your spirit today. One of the neat things I like, especially as I get up early in the morning, I find that God has a way of speaking to me early in the morning than late at night. The very best time I find for hearing God's voice is when I get up in the morning, the house is quiet, nobody's around, whatever, or if they're around, you don't know it because they're sawing logs in their own bed type thing. What I'm talking about, just snoring all the way. And I'm alone with God. It's one of those times. One of the reasons I love to get up so early on Sunday mornings is because I get up and I get out of the house long before daylight even rises. And it's one of those times where I can get quiet before God and let God speak into my very being. Another time for that is usually at night, right before I go to bed. It's not quite as good as the morning times, but it's a time when I can just finally lay before the Lord and I can just say, God, what is it that you want to speak to me? Is there anything you want to communicate to me before I drift off into sleep? And I find that God is a God that speaks into my spirit. Thought it was kind of interesting this morning as I was getting prepared and coming to church. There were two things that God spoke to me about, and I know that you're dying to know what they are, but I'm not telling you. But I want you to know that God does speak to us. He will communicate to us the things that he desires. That's why here in the middle of the year, I want to look at and discuss with you what I see God's vision for this church and for each one of us to be. I want us midstream to get to a place where we hear the voice of God and say, whoa, God is speaking something, and I need to jump onto that with both feet. You know, it's probably not going to be like any other sermon on vision you've heard, because I would hope not. I want it to be different. I expect it to be different. I think that this sermon may very well have some similarities as to others that you may have heard in regards to vision, but I expect this morning's message regarding where God wants to take us to be different. I want it to be different, because what I'm going to share with you this morning cannot be wrapped up and nicely packaged and carried out in just a few weeks or maybe a few months. We'll not really even accomplish it over the next year, I don't believe. I mean, I can't imagine how we could do that, even over the next year. I believe that what God is going to speak to us, what we'll finally discover today, is that we'll probably take the better portion of our lives to see come to pass. That what God wants to do in each one of us will probably take the rest of our lives. It's going to take a long-term commitment to that which Jesus expects of us. So today I want you to take a journey with me in what I believe to be the heart of God for our church and our personal lives. And I want to look at it, what I see to be God's vision for this group of believers. Therefore, it is my vision as well, and I'm hoping that you will capture it also. Because if we can capture God's vision, we'll be amazed at where God will take us. You ever have one of those experiences where after the fact you look back and say, man, I don't know how that happened. It was just a God. You know that God lifted you from one place, and through the process of time and events, he deposited you in some other place, and you look back and you can say, only God. It was just one of those God things that God did in us. And so I want us to go on that thing, because I believe that when we finally grasp what God is saying, when we finally get a hold of what God's vision is, we'll be amazed at where it takes us.